Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to my channel. My name is Paul, the Canadian Snowman, back here once again with some more awesome history. Why didn't the USSR annex Eastern Europe after World War II? Good question. I'm just assuming maybe it would maybe create another kind of war where, other nations may have rise above and then pushed them out. Then again, maybe not. I don't know. I really don't know because I really don't think many other countries after World War II would really want to still fight. So, but I think there would have been a lot of civil wars. Maybe just, the USSR just didn't want to deal with that. I really don't know. But we're about to find out. Before you do, please hit that like and subscribe button below. I'd really appreciate it. And let's get into the video. Woo! Bam.
The Soviet Union was once a widely impressive global superpower and the foundation of the massive Eastern Bloc throughout the Cold War period.
I always forget because sometimes like Soviet Union to Russia, sometimes I kind of forget, obviously don't really forget, but realize just how much they lost when they went from the Soviet Union to Russia. Just how everything just broke off and how this giant country, well, you know, basically broke off and shrunk. Well, I guess it's still large. Like Russia is still like the largest country in the world, but it's wow, that was a big deal, back in the '90s when, early '90s when the Soviet Union fell. But anyways, get back on.
Encompassing Russia and its neighbors and having a heavy influence over the rest of Europe, the USSR was the polar opposite of the United States and its Western allies. We know that, ultimately, the Soviet Union met an inevitable demise as communism crumbled across the East. Would this have changed if the USSR had consolidated its authority even further? What if the Soviets had incorporated all of Eastern Europe? And more importantly, why didn't they?
I don't know.
This video is sponsored by Private Internet Access, which is a simple-to-use VPN application for access all of your traffic, meaning you get a secure at the same time. There's privacy for less than $3 a month.
Shaking is all of your
Hold on one
stabilizing
second,
muscles
guy.
that
One
don't
second.
always fire when you do traditional.
Titles.
Because I guess they could have, but I guess just too much uprising. I guess I don't know.
The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was first established in 1922 and spanned over parts of Europe and Asia with its roots in Soviet Russia. The reason why Moscow never consolidated its power throughout all of Eastern Europe has a bit to do with money and a tad to do with politics, but at least some to do with the strategies of Joseph Stalin himself. First, it's important to look at how the Soviet Union was initially formed and what state it was in prior to the outbreak of the Second World War. The period following the First World War saw a chaotic and evolving status of the Russian state. After the Russian Revolution, Civil War, and Red Terror, a treaty was signed between Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, and what was then known as the Transcaucasian Federation of modern-day Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan in 1922. This treaty officially established the USSR under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin in Moscow. Upon Lenin's death in 1924, Joseph Stalin rose to command in his place and focused first on fortifying his power within the Union he already had. Economy and development became a priority, and the new dictator enacted a series of 5-year plans in hopes of boosting the Soviet economic growth, as well as speeding up industrialization and collectivizing agriculture. The Communist Party was too concentrated on establishing their ideal Marxist state to worry about anything else at this point, and this building process continued all the way up to the commencement of World War II. The USSR quickly decided to enter and occupy Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia in 1940, but this was not as unpredictable as one might assume. These territories had actually been fused with Imperial Russia before the formation of the Soviet Union. So when a deal was brokered with Germany that allowed the Soviets to retake these lands, they did so with significant ease. Finland would also cede some of its territory to the USSR as a result of the Russian-Finnish War around the same time. But nonetheless,
Otherwise known as the Winter War, right? Which I've done a video on the Winter War, Finland versus Russia. So definitely check that out if you haven't. Yeah, that was definitely very interesting. So I definitely know what they mean with that. So that's cool stuff.
as a result of the Russian-Finnish War around the same time. But nonetheless, this was yet again a region very familiar with the old Imperial Russia. The Soviets found further success, though, when Romania gave up its lands as we know today by the name of Moldova. During the war, for obvious reasons, the Soviet Union was rigorously preoccupied with the events of the conflict, but they still managed to take this opportunity to further expand. And by the end of the war, this sphere had expanded to incorporate Poland, East Germany, Romania, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, and Albania. Many wonder why the USSR didn't turn their influence into outright authority throughout this Eastern Bloc. But the
I also I guess didn't really realize how much they did control right there. So wow, that's huge. I mean, I also only think the outside powers like the U.S. I mean, they're all Britain. They all have their own issues, man. Like they were barely hanging on really to beat Germany, kind of thing. So. I don't think they would have been up for another war to take back this land right here. I think they'd have been like, here and have it. So this would be interesting to kind of find out right here.
didn't turn their influence into outright authority throughout this Eastern Bloc. But the truth is, if they had done so, it likely would have doomed the Union. One factor had to do with the contemporary relationship between the East and West. Though they had been allies during the war, the United States and the United Kingdom were not excessively fond of the Soviet Union. Tensions had only grown since the end of the war, and Joseph Stalin was not oblivious to this. As an intelligent strategist, he knew that if he were to fully incorporate the rest of the USSR's influential sphere, he would simultaneously erode the already weakened relationship he held with the West, which would put the Soviet Union as a whole in danger. Although they had technically won the war, the USSR had been devastated by the conflict. The ravaged states of the Union also meant that they would lack the necessary resources to confidently maintain strong security within an even larger USSR. Knowing all too well that overplaying his hand in these circumstances would explode in his face from multiple sides, Stalin had to come up with an alternative. The easiest way to maintain both influence and distant control of the Eastern Bloc would instead be to put Soviet-friendly governments in power in each surrounding state, rather than trying to bring them under the Moscow government. This tactic made it trickier for the West to accuse the Soviets of overstepping any boundaries, and it required much less economic and military involvement from the USSR as well. The economy was also a leading factor in why Stalin would have wanted to keep his union from expanding much further. The Soviets had to rebuild after peace was made, and that would be enough of a challenge as is. The thoughts of adding more states into the Union that would also need to be reconstructed after the war was utter lunacy and could not be truly considered. There was simply no way that it could be done, and would only serve to self-destruct the USSR in its entirety.
Okay, I guess makes sense. I mean, because I guess you just never really think about all the X's and O's when it comes to this. Yeah, it takes a lot of manpower, and it would take a lot of troops to occupy all that to base, have it part of the USSR. And obviously, you just went through a big war. Like, you have to rebuild. I mean, you've lost so many people. Like, there's just so many factors. And then, yeah, I guess it's right. It would have just blown up in his face. So, wow. But, yeah, that's very smart, though, that, put people who kind of have the same views and stuff in power. I think that was very smart by Stalin doing that, though.
and would only serve to self-destruct the USSR in its entirety. For these reasons, it was not the plan of Joseph Stalin to seize more of the Eastern Bloc, which would instead remain independent and simply uphold pro-Soviet governments. But
Well, like East Germany though, like wasn't it like totally under Soviet control because wait, Gorbachev, I forget the guy's name, who was president or like the leader of the Soviet Union at the time when the Berlin Wall came down. Wasn't that was totally like that was the Soviet Union's call, basically, to let that wall go down, right? It wasn't like East Germany had its own say so. Like that was run by the Soviet Union, right? Or was it? Or actually, or because they had to wait for the big saying, I guess, U.S. president, you know, Gorbachev, take down that wall, something like that. Anyway, and so it kind of confuses me. If they all have their own kind of governments, why was it needed for Gorbachev to be the one to give the okay for that wall to come down? If they're all kind of run by their different people. Maybe it was just East Germany. I don't know. I'm mumbling and rambling on, but maybe you guys can kind of let me know in the comments. That'd be kind of cool video to do down the line. Something about the Berlin Wall.
after Stalin's death, even more contributing factors came to light.
Okay, guys. It's okay. It's only 2 seconds. You got her done. See? Bam.
At first, the Soviets seemed to be in a strong position by the 1950s, and 2 years after Stalin's death, the Warsaw Pact was established as a response to the creation of NATO, and appeared to confirm the Soviets' capability across the Eastern Bloc, without the need to officially claim the rest of the sovereign territories. While the Warsaw Pact would later crumble, for now, it proved that the Soviet strategy had paid off. Back at home in Moscow, though, the next decades would demonstrate something very different. In a period marked by de-Stalinization and the Cold War concurrently, the Soviet government began to change. Nikita Khrushchev, who took control after the fall of Stalin, was widely critical of his predecessor and swiftly moved to pass reforms that would improve the Soviet living conditions and change the current status quo. These new shifts didn't sit well with the Communist Party, though, and Khrushchev was ousted by his own party in 1964. It wasn't just the Communist Party that was showing resistance either. Multiple rebellions had broke out throughout the Soviet sphere, and the liberalization process occurring in the Warsaw state of Czechoslovakia became enough of a threat that the Soviets, along with the rest of the Warsaw states, minus Albania and Romania, invaded their own ally. This was merely the start of a new wave of turmoil that would not only ruin the USSR, but also made it abundantly clear that still any idea to incorporate the rest of Eastern Europe into the Soviet Union would be dangerously impossible. Essentially, the reason why the USSR never incorporated the rest of its eastern neighbors into the Union can be simplified to say that there was never a good time. The more complex answer, of course, would be that the West was always a threat and would have undoubtedly reacted with great resistance if the Soviets had attempted to claim their influential sphere as part of the USSR. This doesn't even include the cost.
Yeah, I basically did. They're going back to the same kind of almost the same reasons as they did right after World War II. I mean, if everything was all good and together after World War II, they probably could have claimed it and got everything they wanted, because everyone is still recovering after the war. But like now, it's definitely too late. I mean, the West would have definitely put their influence, on the neighboring states, and it just the West wouldn't have allowed, for that to happen. It was just too late by then.
Sphere as part of the USSR. This doesn't even include the cost that it would take to restore the Soviet infrastructure, military, and everything else that the war had wasted. If the USSR had expanded, they would have been charged with the duty of not only repairing their own foundation, but of doing the same for their newly consolidated territories. Not every satellite state or sovereign nation within the Soviet sphere was an inherent ally. Many revolted against their Moscow-backed governments. It would have likely taken an exertion of military force on behalf of the Soviets to keep these states within the Union, and even if they could have handled this, it may not have been worth it. And lastly, the rise and fall of neighboring Yugoslavia begs one more question. Would ethnic discord have caused yet another challenge for the USSR if it had expanded over the entire East? There seems to be endless explanations for why the Soviet Union never expanded beyond its initial peak. So the real question may not be why didn't the USSR incorporate the rest of Eastern Europe, but instead, why would they have even tried?
True, I guess, right? Why would they even try? I mean, because, they want more land, and they just kind of feel like they have a bigger influence, and maybe for future missions, maybe to take on all of Europe, kind of thing, maybe just very down the line kind of plans, which wouldn't have worked anyway, but, just, trying to have communism, grow, you want to, and occupy as much land as possible, pretty much, right? It's kind of the deal. But anyways, definitely a cool video, because it's one of those things that I really didn't think of, or I guess understand. I mean, obviously everyone knows World War II, and I've done videos on Russian history as well. But this part, still, kind of never really thought about. But then when I seen the title, oh, that'd be kind of cool just to kind of get that straightened out in my head of what really went down and all that kind of cool stuff. But anyways, guys, please hit that like and subscribe button below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know below if this is new to you and you're glad you kind of learned about this kind of stuff. So, because I think it's really interesting and cool. And Russia, Soviet Union is definitely a very giant, very interesting, complicated, they have a complicated history in the country and everything, and so it's definitely fascinating to learn about. But anyways, guys, catch you guys in future videos, and always a pleasure. Have a great night, great day, and I am out here. Woohoo!